Okay, Anatoly Yakovenko, GM. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome to be here. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Lots to talk about with Solana and the entire ecosystem, but let's start broadly. We are in a brutal crypto bear market. I just want to get your take on how that's affecting projects like yours. Of course, it's not just crypto. I mean, it's everything. It's stocks. It's the whole economy right now. But how much of a challenge does that create either with raising funds for various apps, building, recruiting? How is it affecting the day-to-day with building out Solana right now?
So I think we just ran our hackathon, and it was actually our largest hackathon yet. We had 15,000 registrations as opposed to I think 6,000 or 7,000 the previous one, and 700 teams finished. And the top teams are like raising at like I think still pretty high valuations. So I don't know if it's there's still some lag, I think, especially for seed level teams, where a lot of the funds raised very massive war chest last year. But Electric, A16Z, and a whole bunch of the folks raised billions of dollars of capital. So I think for seed stage startups, there's still a lot of opportunities. I think when you're raising much bigger rounds, investors are very much focused on not just growth, but revenues and things like that. And with crypto especially, that's really, really tough because I think a lot of crypto revenues are very much bull market driven.
And, I want to ask about the upcoming conference and everything like that. What do you want to set the tone for the conference?
Well, I think we call it Breakpoint because it's kind of a break. Mm-hmm. But I think that's important to take a break and then look back at like what we accomplished, what the challenges were over the last year. And I think really re-energize everyone to continue building, because I think looking at like macro stuff, my guess is there's probably like 12 to 18 months more of this brutal kind of Fed rates going up, but there is an end to it. And like, just like the last bear market, a lot of teams that built and focused on product market fit and really tried to build amazing products, a lot of those succeeded, and they succeeded, I think, in a very dramatic way. I think that's the opportunity right now, is for a lot of folks in the ecosystem and Solana, but in crypto in general, is to really get heads down and start thinking about like product market fit and iterating and really building these awesome products that get us to the next adoption cycle.
Yeah. I mean, Breakpoint has pretty quickly become like famously one of the biggest crypto conferences you could go to. Do you think that the vibe is going to be a little different? I know you're saying, it's to take a break, to kind of remind everyone to kind of like buckle in. It's going to be a little while, but, are you expecting the atmosphere to be a little different this year?
Are people going to be depressed and somber? I don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
I think, like hanging out at like Solana spaces or hacker houses, people are still having fun. Mm-hmm. So I think despite the massive downturn, I don't know if just a lot of the builders have been through more than one cycle and they're like, well, here we go again. We might as well make the best of it. So they tend to have a pretty good attitude about it.
Yeah, when you use that phrase about heads down and building, I mean, in some ways over the years, and I remember the last cycle was 2018, you heard the same thing. I mean, it's almost become a cliche. People in crypto and the market is down, they say, well, this is a good time to build and we're heads down and building. But as I also like to say, like, it's the truth. I mean, some of the healthiest things now were built in the last bear cycle. Now, all that said, it certainly does affect the perceptions and narratives outside crypto, and we're especially interested in these things as journalists, like how the non-crypto natives perceive crypto as a whole. And the Terra collapse, especially, I think was pretty brutal for the reputation of the industry, even though, it shouldn't have been, because that was its own thing and the idea of an algorithmic stablecoin. But, I think it kind of caused the average person who maybe already thought crypto looks shaky and I don't really believe in it, to say, see, and they were able to point to that. Do you worry yourself much with like those perceptions, especially, as a project that aims to onboard more people into Web3? How damaging do you think the last 6 months have been to the larger perceptions around the whole industry?
Yeah, I think it's been really hard to, especially non-savvy people. And those are typically the people that get into the space. They just get excited and they don't really know the difference between Celsius and Luna and like Aave or Solana or whatever. And to like explain it to them, it's not just a tweet, right? It's like a lot of conversations and a lot of learning. And that's, a lot of those folks got burned basically. And that, especially because a lot of people get into crypto simply because people promise that, yields or whatever, right? There's going to be free money, but that's never the case, right? Everything that's too good to be true usually is. And, I think historically we've seen things like this do take solid, at least a year to shake out. Like, I remember we almost got out of the bear market in 2019, except for like the plus token thing. Like there's just always something in crypto that just like shoots itself in the foot, but hopefully it makes it more resilient. I don't know what happens in the next cycle, but I think maybe if just the number of crypto savvy people gets larger and larger, it just becomes a faster immune response to push projects out that are definitely, way more risk than they're pretending to be.
It feels like we're starting really negative here, but I do want to give you a chance to talk about the outages. There was one just last week. I think the count now is at 5 in the last year. Let's just address them because I feel like it comes up all the time, and we're
it's 3 this year, 5 total in the lifetime of Solana. These have been, and just to be fair, there's also been periods where there's been a lot of congestion on the network where it's been unusable too, but not an outage. So yeah, this has been like the biggest challenge for us, and like the number one priority. And so far they've been in like software bugs that are just human software bugs. Solana is a pretty complex piece of software. It's a monolithic chain, so it's like Ethereum, but does everything all at once, and that means the amount of work that we have to do to achieve the kind of scalability that we did is like pretty complex. And this is still software written by humans. So this particular bug was a bug in a corner case where a misconfigured validator produces 2 blocks for the same slot, and the network gets confused which fork is the real fork. And like all systems that are, BFT systems, Solana picks safety over liveness. So when something like that happens, the validators just give up and say, we're not going to make any more blocks, we're not going to vote. And that stalls the network. But at no point do failures like these put any user's funds or program state at risk, because Solana has 2,000 different validators. That's effectively, or 3,400 different replicas. So that's a lot of different copies of the state. As long as one of these copies survives, you can effectively recover the whole network. So it's extremely robust from that perspective, that no matter what happens, if there's a catastrophic failure, it'll recover. But obviously reliability is really, really important to users, to marketplaces like Magic Eden, especially to DeFi applications that depend on liquidations. So this is the number one priority for us, is to nail down and find all these bugs. And the really long-term fix for this is FireDancer, which is a second client built by a separate team. So a whole other team of software engineers that are building a very high-performance client. Their target is like 10 gigabit networks. That means 1 million TPS.
Right.
But because it's a separate team, the probability of them having the same bugs in their code as ours becomes virtually zero. So this kind of thing, client diversity, is very important. And that's a really big investment in the ecosystem. But of course, each Solana release on its own gets more and more reliable, and we, gets better and better with every release.
Yeah. I want to ask specifically about the validators. I saw in the August validator report there were about 3,400 validators then.
So
That number has, yeah.
Yeah, so those are boxes.
Okay.
There's kind of different ways you can measure it. There's 3,400 different computers on the network that maintain the state. About 2,000 of them participate in consensus while voting.
Okay.
So that's like 2,000 block producers. And there are different reasons why you'd want to count both of those.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So those are not the same number. So I'm seeing about, maybe I think it was 2027 when I just checked on the site now. The 3,400 and the 2,000, these are counting different things.
Yeah, so if you think of it from like Yellowstone blows up, right? Like some really major event that destroys computers. It doesn't matter what the computer was doing, whether it's like serving RPC requests for Magic Eden or validating for Lido. As long as that computer survives and has a copy of the state, the rest of the network can recover from it. So when you think about decentralization, there's different facets of what you care about. One is catastrophic failure resiliency. So you kind of want to know what's the total number of computers in the world that have an active copy of the state. Bitcoin's is at roughly 12,000, which is really, really awesome. But there's like only 6 mining pools that really make blocks. So, and that is not, 6 is not a very high number, and that impacts censorship resistance and a whole other bunch of things. So in Solana, there's about 2,000 validators that make blocks. And that's important for making sure that, everybody has a chance to find a block producer in whatever, geographic area they may live and under whatever regulatory environment they may live.
And, when you mentioned the number of large Bitcoin mining pools there are in the world, and of course, another example is I think leading up to the Ethereum merge is when a lot of people out there suddenly discovered for the first time just how much of Ethereum is parked on, huge cloud-based storage servers, AWS and others. All that is just a way of saying, and this is something I heard a lot from our interviews at Mainnet, that almost the dirty secret of a lot of crypto and DeFi especially is like, it isn't so decentralized. It's pretty centralized. And in some ways, the ideal of decentralization, I think, gets kind of overplayed in crypto. Do you feel that way, that there's going to be a reckoning there with that term?
No, I think that argument is not really, I would say, like thoughtful, because these distributions, they always follow some power law. You're always going to have, let's say, concentration in a few data centers, but then there's a long tail of small validators or home validators or whatever. And that actual long tail is what matters. The where the concentration is, it's important for some things like censorship resistance, like right now, like how long do I have to wait until I find a block producer that's willing to take my transaction? Those are like day-to-day kind of concerns. But when you're talking about like long-term resiliency, is there at least one node somewhere like in Australia or whatever, or in the middle of Africa that's really, really hard to reach and destroy? And that makes the system much more expensive to shut down or really take out.
Good answer. Good segue. I want to make sure I bring up, and you probably are sick of being asked about this, but you brought up Ethereum, and I mentioned the merge just now. Do you still feel like Solana first and foremost, when people are talking about the multi-chain future, it gets compared to Ethereum? Sometimes they all get banded together as Ethereum killers. Are you trying to get away from that, or do you think that understanding of Solana is advancing? Do you feel like you're still often tracking your success against Ethereum?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that we do sometimes track our success against Ethereum in terms of like not validator adoption, but like developer adoption. I think it's really important because they are the market leader. And I think that's been, interesting to see what kind of devs choose Ethereum over Solana. And it's been, very much, well, what's funny to me is that people call Solana an Ethereum killer, but we're so different. We're almost like complementary in a lot of ways. I think Ethereum is very focused on this idea that validators need to be extremely cheap, and they're sacrificing everything else to create that. And their sharded network and everything else that they're planning to do in the future is all based around this idea of very cheap validation. But that opens up the space to a very decentralized network, but one that is, like really optimized for consensus at the speed of light. How do we make the network as fast as possible? And there's just use cases that you can't run on Ethereum that you can run on Solana. And this is where I start seeing devs really pick Solana over Ethereum.
So I want to kind of go back to the multi-chain future thing that Dana picked up on. We heard it from so many people, and frankly, everyone thinks that their chain is going to be part of the multi-chain future. I mean, of course you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here building now. So you mentioned that you guys, more so than competing with, kind of complement Ethereum. What other chains do you think are going to, kind of be part of that ecosystem going forward, maybe 5-10 years?
I'm actually not. So there's, I don't know what's going to happen if we're going to have a multi-chain future or not. Mm-hmm. And there's different reasons, I think, to think about it. One is when you use an application, you're typically right now still aware that you're using a Solana application or an Ethereum one. Mm. And maybe users that are crypto native care to make that distinction. But as we saw with NFTs, we started seeing people not even know that they're using Solana, they were using Magic Eden, and not even realize that folks were telling me that they bought this thing on Phantom, and I'm like, okay, Phantom's only on Solana. And we're seeing a new kind of folks enter the space. And this is only now with 10 million people that are using these chains on a monthly basis. And that was at peaks, probably 3 million right now. Mm-hmm. So when we get to 100 million, is that next 90 million going to care about the blockchain that it's using? Or are they going to be using it for, the killer app that brought them there? And if it's the killer app, we're maybe leading to a world that's not multi-chain, that there's killer apps that can actually define the environment or where execution happens. Because these are back-end systems and they may converge into something that's, equivalent to something like AWS and cloud-based competitive distribution. So that doesn't mean that it won't be a multi-chain world, but it may be a world where, a very large portion of transactions, maybe 90% of transactions occur in one environment.
It's interesting to hear you reference I feel like years old mantra that eventually when blockchain is working like it should, people shouldn't be aware they're using it. In the early days, I remember I've been writing about Bitcoin since 2011, and people used to say much more often, it should be like, HTTPS, or SMTTP. You use email, you don't understand how it works. You just know you click send and it sends. And we are definitely not there yet. But do you think something like Helium might be the first example of that? I mean, talk a little bit about what they're up to with their network, and they've just transitioned it over to Solana.
Yeah, what's I spent my career at Qualcomm, so mobile industry is really close to my heart, and as an engineer there, you can imagine how frustrated you are where you set up your wireless router at home, but then you have the same technology for cellular service and you can't set it up. There's no developer user way to do it and work with it on your own. There's no APIs for it. I can't go build a bunch of stuff on Verizon's network like I can on AWS. So it's a very kind of non-engineering friendly world. What's awesome with Helium is that it's self-serve. People can actually go buy their own equipment, set it up anywhere. So you're not if you're living somewhere rural America, you're not blocked by AT&T. You're not waiting for them. You can actually take control of your own life. That's I think really, really important. But to me, what's awesome is that now all of these machines are programmable. They can interact with smart contracts. You can start building really interesting things or topologies on them, do optimizations between paths and all sorts of really cool stuff. So that I'm super excited about. I think 5G is a really, really complicated technology. You're going from 4G radios that have a range of 30 kilometers, 30, 40 kilometers to 500 meters. So you need a density of that is much, much higher than most folks realize. It's basically we need like a router in every block and, and every, half mile. And that's going to take a lot of installation. So there's a possibility that Helium might be the most dense, fastest rolling out 5G network, within 2 to 5 years. That would be really cool to see.
I want to ask a question about, I guess, building and like kind of like the engineering ethos. Like, did you go into engineering because, that's what you cared about and you saw that as the way forward? Or did you kind of pick that up from engineering that has kind of like permeated throughout everything else you've done? I mean, from the top of the podcast, you've been talking about, you want to see people build, you want to see people wanting to develop and kind of be able to do their own thing.
Yeah, I was kind of a geek, I guess. So started like installing Linux from scratch, like in the 90s, figuring out how to program in C. These were like what I was doing with my friends in high school is like like messing around with like operating systems and open source and computers, and that was pretty exciting. And like in the 90s, it actually like the open source movement was had like a lot of impact on me. You really did feel like a bunch of people that were working on stuff for fun were competing with like the biggest, most aggressive tech company in the world, Microsoft. And there was this almost like a true fight. It felt like what was funny to me is that like this idea that there's no way Microsoft could kill Linux because it was built by people for fun. Like the building was the fun of it. Like it wasn't like done for profit, and therefore there was no like company to acquire or to like put out a business, because I'm literally coding because I enjoy it. And this is something that I think a lot of crypto folks actually share as well, that despite the bear market or whatever, people just want to build and build for fun. And that's a very, I think, kind of a, if you have that experience, you're probably an engineer, like, or you should be one.
Nice. Yeah, since we were talking a little bit about your past at Qualcomm, let's stick with like the personal side of things. When we talk about all these projects aiming toward decentralization, something that's also interesting to us journalists is how every project still has kind of the one person who's like the face of it. Obviously like Ethereum has its Vitalik, over at Avalanche there's like Emin Gunsirer, and then for Solana there's you and also Raj to an extent. Do you think of it that way? Do you feel comfortable with that? Are you, looking to be less of the face of it if things succeed? Are there other thinkers in crypto that you look to as influencers?
I'm a huge fan of Vitalik. I think he's, stuff that he publishes, especially on governance and things like that, are really forward thinking. And I think it's important that there's leaders in the space. Not that I don't know if I enjoy it or not. Like I like the like building and sharing code and like sharing like stories with like folks in the community. But I don't know if it's like the thing that I want to do. Like I'm kind of an introvert. I'd rather be like hide in my room, play video games and code or whatever. It's easier online when you're a bit anonymous, or like not anonymous, but you're at least hiding behind the Twitter profile.
Well, it's funny. I mean, we talked to SBF, Stacy and I did, Sam Bankman-Fried, and he's another example where he's just not who you'd expect to see on a giant billboard, on a sports stadium. But now he's in their ad campaigns. We sort of asked him about that, and it's just interesting. I think crypto has produced some interesting leaders, like public-facing types.
Rise of the introverts and the engineers.
Yes, better put. Yeah.
Actually, this is a good segue because, and I'll make one more, I guess, comparison or mention of Sam over at FTX. He's talked a lot about how it's been a bit of a journey for him to get comfortable going into DC and trying to work with people on regulation, but it's just something he has to do if he wants to see his company succeed and make sure he has a seat at the table. Have you been getting involved in any of the regulation or the policy talks? Are you worried about how things are going to go in any of the different markets where you guys have nodes and Solana set up?
I like not super directly. I think I've talked to a few folks and just really been trying to explain to them how the tech works and get
Mhm.
technical on like this is how the systems can fail, right? These are the risks and things like that. So they can understand, like, kind of pull the cover a bit and so they can understand how things work under the hood. That's been basically like my approach. I'm, like the 90s, internet was blowing up, and you had both Napster and Google were sharing music online. But the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was passed by Congress and kind of split the define what the right way to do it and what the wrong way was. And I suspect something like this is coming out of Congress. I don't know when, but like I'm pretty positive on like overall the folks that I've talked to want to see these founders, these startups succeed in the United States. They want the United States to be a leader in the world of innovation and tech and crypto included. And it's just a matter of like the wheels slowly churning to that outcome.
Nice.
Wow, that's pretty optimistic. Especially considering some of the recent rhetoric
It's not going
from
to be
the
perfect.
SEC and
It's never going to be perfect, right? It's going to be like, as imperfect as the DMCA, but like there will be something, and I think the industry and will move forward, and I'm pretty confident in US being the leader.
Wow, yeah, that's good to hear, especially with Gary Gensler thinking every single thing is a token. Well, another fun segue, Stacy. Speaking of tokens, let's talk a little bit more about NFTs. You mentioned Magic Eden earlier. Jack Liu was our most recent guest on this podcast. That was fun. And, Magic Eden, for the beginning of its existence, it's pretty short existence. It's only been around a year, but man, has it grown quickly, was a Solana thing. It's a Solana NFT marketplace. Now they've expanded to Ethereum as well. But the overall share of the NFT market that is on Solana has really increased quickly. I think it changes every day, but last I checked, the volume for the most recent day was like a third as many Ethereum NFTs, were Solana NFTs. So, and as you said, ideally, there are lots of people now who don't even know that it's a Solana NFT. Fine. What do you see as like the potential and the use cases overall for NFTs, especially I'll couch it this way. Recently, I'm hearing more and more people point out that, it isn't as though NFTs are just digital art. That's just the first example and use case that everyone talks about, and because of PFPs and apes and all that stuff. But hearing a lot of people get excited about future uses of NFTs beyond just art.
Yeah, I think these are like basically, I think if you're thinking about like your dream is to build the next Disney, the next Marvel, this is probably the best launch point for that. One, because crypto as a financial opportunity as a whole is just a massively expanding one, and you're not going to find that anywhere else. But two, this is like, I think, a whole new way to develop IP and storytelling and lore and like all these things that are really important to build these properties. So like I already see projects that are trying to be more brand specific and build brands. Like, Hello Kitty is a very big brand, right? There's that's a thing that exists, right? So there's folks that are trying that approach. There's people that are focused only on stories and lore and creating kind of like IP around the characters and everything else. That's a whole different genre of NFTs. And I think a lot of them too kind of fall into like, these are micro social networks. People get this NFT and they join groups, and it doesn't really matter if they communicate in like a Twitter DM group or in Discord or whatever, probably multiple places at once. But the only thing that's uniting them is this, being part of the monkey DAO or whatever. So social networks are obviously, I think, especially a million small DAOs is kind of a thing that I think is happening as well. I haven't seen anything that was like, there was like a million bulletin boards in the 90s, and then all of a sudden somebody figured out how to go from like 6 Degrees to Friendster to MySpace to Facebook. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't know if it's because we still only have like a few million people that use blockchain like on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of people that hold crypto, but like actually monthly actives is altogether is pretty small. And if that we see a shift to like a large enough number, are we going to see people figure out how to create very large groups around something that we haven't seen yet?
Why is your first example Hello Kitty of a successful IP brand?
Because I think that's like it's, I don't know, it's everywhere, right? Like and like kind of in the background, it's almost like everywhere, nowhere. Like, and that's so huge and pervasive, and there's no other product really, like I think like that I can imagine that's a pure brand and nothing else, which is really kind of really funny. Like, because I think Hello Kitty and like all the IP came after. All the characters, comic books, or anything else like came after the brand. It didn't come from like from anything else. The more it's a
good example. So I wanna end and ask like a kind of fun goodbye question. So completely separate from Solana. Your answer cannot be Solana or anything related to it. What's a project or something in the crypto space that you're really excited about right now?
Is it if it's built on Solana, is that okay?
Okay. We always try to get people to say stuff that's not related to anything that's theirs.
I just don't pay attention to that much stuff.
I mean, that's fair.
Solana, which
that's
is
like
hard.
That's like we always ask founders, who are your competitors, and people have to say, well, our biggest competition is ourselves, and innovating on our own. It's like,
shoot. I like don't use other stuff. That's basically the problem. Who have I mean, I can't give a good answer because I just I can pick something out of a hat. But
what about in the like a Solana world? Yeah.
So Squads is pretty cool DAO platform that's making it easier. And then I would say Biomes, which is like a Minecraft like game that has everything's an NFT kind of thing. And I think they're building a really, really good game. And that's, if they can figure out also, like, they have to get lucky twice. They have to build a really good game and to figure out the crypto part of it in like a way that works well with the game. And that could be, I think, potentially like one of these lighthouse game-changing things where it defines like an industry. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, that reminds me, I've got one last quick one too. I wanted to bring it up, but we've also had on this podcast Shiti from Steppen, the CMO of Steppen. And of course, Steppen was this very prominent example of, really a do something, X to earn. In that case, exercise to earn. And I thought a really interesting proof of concept with NFTs that were on Solana. And then, of course, you earn the Steppen token. Now, then the bear market hit and the Steppen token went down like 99%. And so I think it was, it was predictable that the users go down because they wanted to see coin go up. But just what do you make of sort of the arc with Steppen, and what was exciting about that to you? And do you think that such apps can still succeed if there are a lot of people who use it just with the hope of making money?
I think what's cool is that Steppen user numbers didn't drop 99%. So they did so that means that there's users that actually care about the experience of maybe like the motivation behind having something volatile and like an NFT that is making them get up in the morning and go exercise. That's like, I think, a really new way to force you to go work out. And if you ever had to like spend money on like trainers or exercise equipment and stuff like that, or like programs, you can go do all that stuff on your own with like $5 weights, but you're paying for the motivation to actually go do it, right? And this is a very digital example of that, which I thought was interesting. And it worked, I think, for a lot of users. And I think the big unknown is it scalable, and like, can you get the economies to work out where people derive a benefit from the exercise that's like basically exceeds the money that they're spending into the platform. But that's really true about every fitness app or every fitness program out there.
All right. Well, Anatoly, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you
sure.
on GM.
Great chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anatoly.